Well, people are beginning to trickle in to the conference hall here in Brighton for Labour's annual conference. It doesn't officially kick off until 2:30, but that doesn't stop very keen early birds already walking in the stalls as they're setting up. This is a big conference, really, for the Labour Party. They, of course, did not have one in person last year due to the pandemic. So this is really, if we think about it, Keir Starmer's first in-person conference as Labour leader. And there's a lot to prove. There's been many ups and downs for the Labour Party over the last 18 months or so. There's been an enormous amount of criticism of the way that Keir Starmer has not been able to get ahead of the Conservative Party consistently in the polls, but there's also been some surprise successes, retaining that by-election up in Batley and Spen, definitely a highlight for Sir Keir, and also the Labour Party seeming to be able to get a little bit ahead of the Tories, at least a week or two ago when the Conservative Party ditched that manifesto commitment not to raise taxes. So many ups and downs, much to be discussed here. One of the interesting things is that one of the first people to be speaking here today is not Keir Starmer, but his deputy, Angela Rayner, a woman that Keir Starmer tried to move from some of her positions in the shadow cabinet after those local elections where the Labour Party didn't do as well as they had hoped. But actually, there was a bit of a scuffle, a bit of a botched reshuffle, and Angela Rayner took on many more jobs than Keir Starmer wanted her to have. This is someone who has accrued a great deal of power in the Labour Party, and it's interesting to see that it's Angela Rayner who is announcing this New Deal policy platform for the Labour Party this morning.
And Tom, do you want to tell us about this vote, this one member, one vote? And actually, Keir was trying to change the voting pattern to do the third between members, MPs and the unions. That hasn't happened, which seems to be a bad start for Keir at his own conference.
Absolutely. We're kicking off with a botched attempted reform. Now, if we think back to Ed Miliband's days as leader of the Labour Party, he pushed through reform for one member, one vote. That means every single Labour member has the same weight in terms of voting for a new party leader, and crucially also that system allowed people to sign up to the Labour Party for just £3. These £3 registered supporters that signed up in droves in 2015 and helped deliver Jeremy Corbyn to power. Now, we have to say this is the same system that elected Keir Starmer, but it has drawn a lot of criticism from people who are opposed to Jeremy Corbyn within the Labour Party, saying that it gave too much power to people who potentially weren't long-standing Labour Party members and allowed for entryism, allowed for Jeremy Corbyn to seize control of the party. Well, the system before, as you say, was a third. Members would have 1/3 of a say. Trade unions affiliated to the Labour Party would have 1/3 of a say, and another 1/3 would come from MPs and MEPs back in the day. But obviously, if that were to be put back in place, MEPs no longer exist in the United Kingdom. Well, one of the big problems for this is the unions seemed to have to start a bit of a backlash against Keir Starmer. Despite this proposed system being reinstated that would give the unions more power, it was the unions themselves that opposed it. And so when the NEC of the Labour Party met yesterday, there was a big disagreement leading up to that meeting, and Keir Starmer appears to have failed to get what he wanted to happen through. And so this really does show that potentially Keir Starmer is not someone fully in control of his party. This is someone who was elected by the Labour Party 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and really since then has not been able to make as much of a mark in terms of the internal structures on the party as he perhaps would have liked. As I said, he botched that reshuffle after the local elections. There are people in his shadow cabinet who have a lot of power, who he potentially doesn't want to have a lot of power, and now, of course, he's faced huge opposition, even from members of his own shadow cabinet, in terms of this reform to the voting system for the leadership. So it looks like that same system that elected Jeremy Corbyn within the Labour Party will be staying for the foreseeable future.